I know that the Metropolitan Police lie to Mr. Khan. That's what they do. They don't even know what grooming gangs they've got. They don't even know. They're not collating them. You basically go into the system, you lock up a crime, and nobody can find it again. By corrupting the data, you have corrupted any chance of establishing the facts. He's basically authorised them to continue their corrupt practices. If you hide up child's safeguarding concerns, you lock them up and they no longer exist, how can a coroner decide what risk that child was exposed to whilst they were alive? I'm Bernadette Murray. I'm a retired detective with the Metropolitan Police. I worked for them for 32 years, 30 of those years in the Criminal Investigation Department. I have to say the first 25 years were the best in my life, but the last 8 were hard. About 2009, as a result of Lord Laming's reports, Met Police created a system to ensure that no child ever fell through the safeguarding net again, as Victoria Colombier and Peter Connolly had.
So this was like a revolutionary method for safeguarding children, and from what you're saying, it was highly effective as well in a borough that had had lots of problems previously. Yeah,
we evolved very quickly. It was a steep learning curve, but we were communicating. We were in the same room. I could, head of children's services was asking daily, weekly, how we were getting on, what else did we need. Like I say, it seems silly, but we had a car. We could literally go and see what the problems were.
What was the scale of the issue that you were encountering when you were there?
So within 3 days of transferring to Haringey, I came across on the children's safeguarding computer system, secure email system, I came across rejected reports. So they were what we basically call floating. So they'd been sent to the child abuse investigation team at Haringey because they were investigating a crime, and this report was the safeguarding concerns for the child involved in that crime, whether they were the victim or the suspect. And they had rejected that report that had been emailed to them, and that just sent it off into the ethos. Nobody had responsibility for those concerns. So I found those on the system like an administration mole. I was reading it, and it was from British Transport Police, who used the Metropolitan Police safeguarding computer system. And they had written about their concerns for a little girl. I think she was 10, she was still at primary school, who was living with a man they described as a pimp. So I did my research, and I found that the matter had gone to the child abuse investigation team because the child had been assaulted by this man, and so had the child's mother, and that the mother was currently in prison, and the child had been left in the care of this man. So I asked an officer to go down to the primary school. He went down as a result of what the head teacher, classroom teachers, and the child told him. He took the child into police protection. We can keep the children in our protection for several hours, days, but normally you hand them to social services as soon as you can, because they have got the better communications with emergency foster carers. Either way, you need to know where that child's sleeping that night. Basically, an officer at the child abuse investigation team told the social workers to return the child to the man. I didn't know that had happened. So you ended up with a situation where you had a man who was known to police for violence in this country, and no checks done with the country that he came from as to what he'd was known for in that country, if it was known for anything at all. He had hit this child. He had hit the mother. He was also suspected and being investigated for giving the mother drugs at prison. And he had been given the care of a 9-year-old little girl, basically because she was what I call a financial commodity. She came with a home. All children must have a home. So she had a home. Wherever that child was, she would always have a home. So he would basically taken over the mother's flat whilst the mother's in prison and had this 9-year-old there. And the child abuse investigation team said, it's of no concern to us because we've got no information about that child at all. It's nothing to do with us. You give the child back.
How often did that happen, that there would be a situation like that there was not the adequate or what should happen happened?
In the 18 months that I was supervising pre-assessment checks, I didn't come across a single report that was done to a satisfactory standard by any officer at the child abuse investigation team.
And those are hundreds of children that were at risk?
There are hundreds of children that a frontline officer or any police officer has concerns about that child's welfare and well-being, and we need to dig deeper to make sure we know who that child really is and that safeguarding concerns are shared with children's services. I think they actually thought it wasn't their remit to safeguard children. They were just there to investigate child abuse. I don't think they understood that they're entwined.
What are the consequences of them not being able to use the computer system?
That none of the children that they were investigating during that period could be safeguarded correctly. So for missing persons, I needed to reduce. It's really, really expensive to have children go missing. And somebody said it's £1,000 a child. So when you're having 10 a day, that's a lot of money for a borough. And I also knew, even in 2010, that if you can save money, you're more likely to get support from senior management. So we organised a huge meeting, and we got lots of carers and lots of children home organisers under one roof to discuss, because we were quite surprised how many people were not doing anything to stop the children from going missing. They weren't. There was things available to them, give the child a phone and say you must answer, practical things. And it was quite interesting for them to all talk about amongst each other about how they didn't do anything. They literally just watched the child walking off at 1:30 in the morning and then call police and say, oh, she's missing again, which we have to then go around and search the home address and the care home and children's home. But we did reduce missing persons by hundreds that first year.
But it was hundreds of children, or
I think the Chief Inspector said, I reckon you've saved us £1 million in this first year of doing this. And criminal intelligence is information that's evaluated and then disseminated to whoever needs to hear it. And there's normally a good criminal intelligence report will be created at the end of an investigation, so that everything learnt from that investigation could be disseminated out. Certainly if you're thinking about the sex offender, every detail about that person would be on a criminal intelligence report to be disseminated, so when they come out of prison and they go and live in Scotland or Wales, that an officer can put their name in and learn about them, tattoos, etc. Basically, a little boy died, and the same senior officer didn't want to put a Chris on for a child's death, I stood up to her and insisted that the child that had died deserved an investigation.
What possible justification did they have for not recording
They
it?
said this 11-year-old had probably committed suicide, so it didn't require a crime report. But we have in the Metropolitan Police, every death is suspicious until the evidence proves otherwise. He was 11 years old. And, you don't know it's a suicide until an inquest concludes it was a suicide. And it's not our job to be making those decisions in the first few minutes anyway. That should have been a crime report. Detectives should have attended the scene, and the siblings should have been safeguarded. Different officers will see the children as different children, and then they won't know that they're on the at-risk register. So we had to put things into place to make sure. But why? Why would you do that? Why would you not create a system to try and safeguard the children? Why did you not want the frontline officers to know? Because they were what? They were going to arrest somebody and you would then have to deal with a prisoner? The more they can stop anything passing over to them, the less work they have to do. And then when we do arrest people, they'll find any excuse under the sun to bail them, to come back to see them.
And then can you talk me through this locking up system, locking up case files?
So I think it was in 2012, might have been at the end of 2011 in Haringey. A 3-year-old little girl left the house that she was meant to be in. And if you know Wood Green, she walked, we worked it out, it was 3 football pitches in length away from the house she was meant to be in. It was not her home. It was apparently somewhere that the family knew people and they were looking after her. She was sat, I don't know if you know Wood Green where the tube station is, and then opposite is a View Cinema, and then there's a taxi place, and it's 4 main roads meeting. Okay, so it's a big junction with quite chaotic with cars and people because they're coming out of the tube, running to the shopping centre, etc. Okay, this child is sat on a curb with her feet in the gutter outside a minicab office. You would not have seen her if you were reversing a car up to parking space, okay? She was at risk at that point. So much so a lady stopped her car, member of the public, stopped her car and picked up the child and was walking around with the child asking people, who is she? She didn't get anywhere, so she dialed 999 and a police officer went down. She wouldn't hand the child to any of these other people. And apparently the police officer was sort of saying, was it your child? What do you mean? Do you know? She's saying, no, I literally have just found this child in the gutter, 10 yards away from a very busy main road. So the 2 young girls came up, 2 teenagers came up. They said, we're meant to be looking after her. The officer took the member of the public's name and phone number, took the first names of these 2 girls and handed the child over. They then came back to their police station and created a pre-assessment check request for me to do the checks on the child. So I received this and I'm like, well, what? How do I do checks when I don't even know the details of this child? So I ring the member of the public and she's not happy. She's not happy with police, how long it took police to get there. She's not happy how the police officer didn't seem to think it was a problem and that had handed this child to these young girls who were giggling and took this child away. So I did get details for the child. I spoke with a man who said he was the child's father. Then he became the uncle. So then I started building a picture around this little girl, and I had concerns she was trafficked. Once you bring a child into this country, you're entitled to housing, and that she was trafficked. And I wanted to find out who Mum really was and whether Mum even knew she was in England, and who Dad was. And there was a report on there saying who her mum was, but that there'd been a domestic situation with the man saying, I'm not the father. So I wasn't sure, and we needed to know. So I forwarded it to Child Abuse Investigation Team for an investigation as to how the child got out, how the child got to be exposed to this situation without anybody realising. And, you know, I asked the officer to put on a crime report because there was no crime report for neglect. The officer declined to put on a crime report, said he'd spoken to Kate on the night, and they said you didn't need to, just send a pre-assessment check request to social services. Eventually, with my manager backing, I created a crime report detailing as much as I could what had taken place, and sent it through for an investigation. So we hadn't seen the little girl. We hadn't actually identified who she properly was. We just had this name. A belief as to who her mother might be. We didn't know if the mother knew she was in this country. If the mother knew that she'd been left with these people, if the mother even knew that she'd got out. And that crime was locked up.
Can you explain what locked up means?
You basically go into the system, the Home Office crime reporting information system, you lock up a crime and nobody can find it again. But what I've argued, and will always argue, is that you cannot justify locking up a crime report that details a safeguarding concern for a child. You'll never be able to justify that.
So you discovered that file has been locked up.
Yeah.
And what happens next?
Well, once I'd contacted the Commissioner, Mr. Hogan Howe, he had tasked Mark Rowley to review my report. I'd typed a 50-page report to the Director of Professional Standards. After a couple of weeks, I contacted Mr. Hogan Howe again to say that I'd not heard anything. I hadn't been invited to join the review, to explain my report to people. And he said, no, Mark Rowley's will be in contact with you. So after a couple of months, I got a letter from Mark Rowley in which he says, he quotes the actual crime report number for that little girl because a social worker went to see a little boy. As a result of that investigation, there are no ongoing concerns in relation to the welfare of this child. I do not accept that locking a CRIS is a dangerous practice, and a CRIS is a crime report information system, a crime report. He put, there is an appropriate explanation on this particular CRIS, and I'm satisfied that officers have acted appropriately in this instance. So he's endorsed the conduct of the Child Abuse Investigation Team officers for that case, and by doing so, he's basically authorised them to continue their corrupt practices. Before I retired and after I retired, the Mayor's office, MOPAC, who are in charge of the Metropolitan Police, were aware of what I'd found out and what I'd seen. I basically contacted them to say, I'm trying to tell the HMIC, the inspectorate, they are going to come to conclusions that I've been witnessing. You need to know that there's no system in place for people like me, reporters of wrongdoing, from being listened to. So I showed them what the Met Police were up to for the cover-ups and corrupting the data. And by doing so, I was explaining how they were cheating the system, basically, so that they could look for themselves. So they actually went around London looking at different offices. And I think they were a bit shocked at just how lacking in understanding the people they met were.
And what do you think the situation is like today?
I think it can only be worse.
So one of the things we've been looking into is directly because of the Mayor's statements are grooming gangs, because the Mayor says that there are no grooming gangs, or there haven't been grooming gangs, and there's no indication that there were any. Based on what you know about the computer systems, can we trust that statement?
I know that the Metropolitan Police lie to Mr. Khan. That's what they do. So they don't even know what grooming gangs they've got. They don't even know. They're not collating them. They're not trying to find them. So they can't say to him, we haven't got any, because you don't know what you don't know.
I guess the other question to follow up on, if you know the Met Police are lying to Sadiq Khan, does he know that they're lying to him?
Well, his auditors will have certainly told them that they're being lied to. In my situation, I know that the child abuse investigation team were misleading every serious case review happening in London during this period, because they kept on insisting that unless there was a crime report with a police investigation, there was no information about that child. And I went to one debrief session, multi-agency debrief session. And at the end of it, I turned to an officer that was in charge of the computer system centrally. And I said, I don't get that. I said, how can we have attended that home address on several occasions and there not be any requests for pre-assessment checks to be completed? By corrupting the data, you have corrupted any chance of establishing the facts. Say, for example, dad's attacking mum or mum's attacking dad, okay? And you go round there, you'll put on a domestic violence crime for the adults. So that will go to the domestic violence unit, and the child abuse team will say, well, it's not our remit, that's their remit. So we're not interested, so we've got nothing. But because of Lord Laming's advice, we would create a report to say, they witnessed that. It's emotional abuse to witness your dad beating up your mum. So therefore, we have an Every Child Matters concerned for the children because they witnessed this crime. When one of those children die in a domestic violence situation and there's a serious case review, or in this case it was the mother died and the children found the body, and there's a serious case review, he's saying, no, Metropolitan Police have no information. But actually the Metropolitan Police have 17 reports of concern. I was transferred 7 times, but one of them wasn't because I'd uncovered something. One of them was upon my request because I was being shouted at so much he was spitting in my face. And as he walked away, the officer that was sat next to me said, please don't tell them that I witnessed that because he'll change my hours and I can't cope if I can't do hours, pick my kids up from school. Please don't you tell them that I witnessed it.